There's a version of the Enki and Enlil story that goes further than most. It claims a tablet describes Enki secretly gifting human women an awakening, hidden specifically in maternal inheritance, so his brother Enlil would never find it, surviving even the flood, and still slowly unfolding in humanity today. Let's separate what's real from what's invented, because there's genuine ancient material here. And there's also a specific scientific claim in this one that needs direct correction, not just as some scholars disagree caveat. Here's what's real. Enki and Enlil, their rivalry, the Anunnaki labor rebellion leading to Enki designing humanity from clay, and the flood narrative with Enki secretly warning the flood survivor through the reed wall trick are all genuine elements of the real, translated Atrahasis epic and related Sumerian and Akkadian literature. That much is accurate ancient text, consistent with what we've covered elsewhere in this series. As with most sources in this series, there's no accession number, no named scholar, and no locatable publication behind the specific claims about a hidden gift in the maternal line, just unnamed researchers and translators, which is the same unverifiable by design pattern we've flagged throughout. Worth naming plainly rather than treating as a fresh mystery each time. Now the science. The tablet's claim connects to something real. Human beings do have a form of inheritance passed only through the maternal line. Mitochondrial DNA, carried in the egg cell and passed from mother to child, generation after generation, essentially unchanged except for rare mutations. And yes, it can be traced back extremely far in the human family tree. That part is real, and it's a genuinely fascinating area of real genetics. Here's where the claim needs a direct, not a soft, correction. Mitochondrial DNA is a very small piece of genetic material whose actual, well-established function is to help run the cell's energy production. It has no established role in consciousness, intuition, dreaming, intelligence, or anything resembling the awakening described here. Framing it as a secret vessel for expanded human awareness isn't a matter of interpretation or open scientific debate. It misrepresents what this specific piece of biology actually does. The real fascinating fact that we all share an unbroken maternal genetic line reaching back tens of thousands of years doesn't need an invented cognitive function attached to it to be worth knowing. Now, something in this script needs even more direct correction than in earlier entries in this series, because it goes further than the usual "here's an ancient myth" framing. The script explicitly identifies Usadra, the flood survivor in this Sumerian story, as the man you may know by a later name, Noah, presenting the Quranic and biblical account as simply a later retelling of this Sumerian myth. This deserves a clear, direct distinction rather than being left as an interesting parallel. It's true, and genuinely worth knowing, that real comparative religion scholarship has studied structural similarities between ancient Mesopotamian flood narratives and the later Abrahamic account. Shared motifs like a worn survivor, a boat, and surviving creatures are real and documented. But from an Islamic standpoint, Nuh, peace be upon him, is a real prophet sent by Allah, who preached the message of monotheism to his people for centuries before the flood came as a decreed act of divine justice, in response to their persistent rejection of him. Not a Mesopotamian folk hero, secretly tipped off by one god, defying another through a legal loophole. Treating these as the same story with a name change quietly substitutes revealed prophetic history with ancient mythology, and that's worth saying directly rather than letting the resemblance stand unqualified. There's a broader theme running through this script worth naming clearly too, since it's a variation on something we've corrected elsewhere in this series. The idea that human intellect, curiosity, and capacity for growth were originally withheld by design and had to be secretly unlocked by a rebellious lesser being, against the wishes of a higher authority. In Islamic teaching, human capacity for knowledge and understanding isn't something humanity had to sneak past a reluctant creator to receive. The Quran describes Allah directly teaching Adam the names of all things, a foundational account of human intellect and capacity for knowledge being given openly by Allah from the very beginning of creation. Framing human potential as something withheld by design and smuggled in later through a genetic loophole isn't just an unverifiable historical claim. It replaces a straightforward account of Allah's generosity toward humanity with a much smaller story about interdepartmental sabotage among lesser deities. It's worth naming one more thing about how this piece is built, because it's a technique we've flagged before in this series in a different form. The narration repeatedly tells you, specifically, that the gift has been moving through your line, that it's been with you the whole time, waiting for you to listen. This is a real and identifiable technique, personalizing an ancient claim so the listener feels individually chosen, and it's worth recognizing it as a device for engagement rather than evidence that the underlying claim is true. So, where does that leave us? With real, genuinely interesting Sumerian mythology about Enki, Enlil, and the flood, and a real, fascinating fact about human maternal genetic inheritance, wrapped around an invented claim that mitochondrial DNA carries hidden cognitive or spiritual capacity, a direct identification of a Mesopotamian myth with the Quranic and biblical that erases a real and important distinction, and a broader framing of human potential as something withheld and smuggled in, rather than a straightforward gift from Allah given openly at the start of creation. If this kind of thread interests you, the real Atrahasis epic and the real science of mitochondrial inheritance are both genuinely worth learning about directly. Neither needs the other's borrowed drama to be worth your attention. The Sumerians left behind a real and layered story about two brothers who disagreed about what humanity should be allowed to become. That's worth reading as ancient religious belief on its own terms. It doesn't need to borrow the name of a real prophet or a piece of real biology doing work it was never built to do to be worth remembering.